Holy God, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. So this is theoretically Transfiguration Sunday. It's a Sunday in the church year when we celebrate the divinity of Jesus. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach because I'm not going to focus as much on Jesus' divinity, but on the community which surrounds him. My confession is that my sermon is not quite as well thought out as I would normally like it to be, which is part of the reason that we had so many additional resources throughout this Sunday morning so that I was not as responsible for the value of what is being offered. And it probably is also why I'm seeing this as more of a community feature rather than the elevation of a leader Sunday. I believe most of you know that I am having surgery on Friday to remove a mass in my kidney. So I'm feeling a little bit more of my humanity and my mortality and my need for others than I would most days and most weeks and most months. All this to say that I'm not necessarily identifying with Jesus and the light shining off of him and feeling that favor and love of God in the ways that I might, again, other times, other seasons of my life. So I started reading the passage. And this is an interesting Sunday because we really have two very similar passages. We have the reading in Exodus, which is the story of Moses, and then we have the reading in the Gospel of Matthew, which is the story of Jesus. Both of them spending time on the mountain with their companions, away from the communities that they lead, being favored by God and exhibiting this visual favor in the light that shines off of them. And most often when I hear either of these passages preached, I hear this reflection on, again, the extraordinary element of it, the shining favor of God. But what struck me was the community surrounding both of these figures, the community surrounding Moses, the community surrounding Jesus. It's a little bit more evident in the Exodus passage because that specifically mentions not only the two companions, Aaron and Hur, who went up the mountain with Moses, but mentions, scratch that. It was Joshua who went up the mountain and Aaron and Hur who were left behind to continue the leadership of the community. But that's what stuck out to me was that it was not just, oh, and by the way, this person's going up the mountain with one or two friends. It's they're leaving behind the community that they're a part of, but they're not leaving the community behind unattended and unloved and foundering for leadership. There's this clear laying out of these are the people who I have worked with, Aaron and Hur, who are able to do what needs to be done to keep the community going. They're able to help resolve the legal disputes. They're able to provide leadership. And some of that is there in the Gospel of Matthew about Jesus going up on the mountain, but it's more in the sort of afterthought of Jesus is going back to the community. The disciples are sharing this divinity of Jesus. So Moses goes up the mountain, and Moses has been leading the Israelites out of captivity. That's what the story of Exodus is about. He's the one who's been guiding them. He's the one who takes on the brunt of their anger when things go too slowly or aren't as comfortable or familiar as the people want them to be. So again, when you have that type of leader who's kind of the figurehead, in this case, a true leader, but also sort of identified with what it means to lead the people, to take that person out of the community, again, can leave that sort of vacuum, a sense of what do we do now? Who's going to tell us where to go and how to be with one another? And that, again, is the fascinating thing is that question isn't left unanswered. Moses plans for this as he's going up the mountain. He says, I am not the special one. Like, the special one is us as a community. We have people who can do the leadership duties. So there's this interplay between the extraordinary moment and the everyday, nitty-gritty, hands in the mud. What does it mean to be a part of community? And I think that interplay, that contrast shows that you can't have one without the other. You don't get the mountaintop experience without the valleys. You don't get to walk up the mountain without walking forward on just your everyday road. The mountaintop would not be the mountaintop with the rest of the geography of the land around it. The nitty-gritty and the mud and the dirt of everyday leadership, of taking the blame when decisions go wrong, or of being unpopular because nobody's ever happy with a compromise, also would not look the same without those extraordinary moments. So you might be wondering, what's the point? I'm standing up here wondering that with you. I think the point is that while we want to point to the transfiguration, the divinity, the shining face of Jesus, we also have to point to Aaron and Hur and the everyday decision makers, the people who do the work of community, because community isn't possible in isolation. And again, I think that's what drew me to each of the pieces that Lance so kindly read, much more than he normally would have read, to Flawless, that points out that there is something about our humanity that makes us divine, that reflection on showing up hungry, where there is something about even the frustrating aspects of personality, of being a little bit sour at the end of the day because you're tired, or of being a little bit salty because somebody said something the wrong way to you, that add the flavor to the meal. And I think shortly, that's why we celebrate communion every Sunday, is because it's in joining around the table that we're able to know both those extraordinary moments and the ordinary ones that each of us go through throughout our lives, that help us to know one another and love one another, and as was said in Show Up Hungry, to be able to both give and to get as part of a community. it's that sort of openness that allows us to grow and to leave the impact and the legacy on the world that we want to be able to have. Even the great leaders that we think of throughout history, those extraordinary people did what they did through the support of the community around them. And I think we forget that sometimes easily because we like the hero of the story, and we want to see ourselves as the heroes. And we all are, in our own way, heroes at different times and in different places. And there's also a reason that there's best supporting actresses and actors, and a reason why sometimes the most memorable characters in the story are not the main character. So I think my invitation to you this week is to recognize the power and the meaning in the ordinary moments in the same way that you do the extraordinary moments. Amen.